Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hey everyone, it's Susan Coughlin, and you are listening to Attitude Magazine's ADHD Experts Audio. Thank you to all of you for joining us today, and welcome back to Kirk Martin of CelebrateCalm.com, who's our guest today. He has helped hundreds of thousands of parents and teachers tackle the most challenging issues: defiance, disrespect, bullying, the whole nine yards. And he'll be talking today about specific strategies for stressed out moms raising kids with ADHD. And some dads too, if you're out there. As I've said, he's worked with children for over 10 years. He's developed strategies that help stop meltdowns, tantrums, power struggles, and yelling. And just check out his site, CelebrateCalm.com, to see some of the wonderful techniques that he can bring to all of us. Today, he's going to focus on why you should ask for help, even if you don't want to, how you can simplify your life, effective discipline strategies that get results, and a pretty big one, how to help your children have the tools that they need to be self-reliant. So with that, let me turn it over to Kirk again with our thanks for being here today.
Hey, I'm excited to be here again, so thank you very much. So I know how stressful it is just raising kids alone, but then when you add kids with ADHD, and sometimes some of the moms out there may have ADHD themselves, so I know it adds a lot of complicating factors of managing medication and going to doctor's appointments and therapists and, checking the report cards at school. It's kind of a never-ending battle. So hopefully today we can give you a few very practical tools to help. So, I have a list of 10 things. I like simple. So I'll just begin. First thing I would suggest for all of us, because I have a child that not only had ADHD, but kind of OCD, sensory issues, a little bit of everything, is just simplifying your life. And I know this is hard for moms, because moms, you do everything. You are like the fixers, and you can do everything at once. And I think you really have to reconcile yourself to the fact that you just can't do everything. So I'd encourage you just to prioritize it and maybe take, if you can, 5 or 10 minutes today and really think through what is most important for your child, what is most important for your family. Try not to, because here's the thing, moms have big hearts. And I know you want to help everyone, but sometimes we begin to gather all these things in our lives. So I one of the hardest things maybe for you is to say no to things. Maybe say no to having extra pets and extra stuff around the house. When we worked with these kids, it was over the course of about a decade, we had 1,500 kids come into our home, usually about 10 to 15 kids at a time. And we just learned these kids extract from you, and not in a bad way, it just works this way. They just extract an enormous amount of physical, emotional, and mental energy. And so we really learned to simplify everything in our lives, and even reducing the clutter in our home. It just helps so that we could focus on the most important issues every day. I'd even encourage you with this. I know it will sound kind of funny, and I don't mean it to be, but it's practical. Saying no to some of the extracurricular activities at times, if you have the option of just putting in your planner every afternoon or evening, just block out 30 minutes for life to happen, because you're going to have power struggles over homework and over dinner and over chores. You're probably going to have some tantrums and meltdowns. They're going to happen. So I'd rather you have time put aside so that you can say, okay, once and for all, we're going to deal with what's the root of this meltdown? Why is my child so frustrated? So that we can get to the root of it, because otherwise we kind of just hurl ourselves through life trying to just put bandages on everything and just get through the day. Or for many of us, I remember when my son was young, by October, I was just thinking, I just want to survive this school year. And hopefully today we can get you out of kind of survival mode into kind of getting on top of things. So that's the first thing, is simplifying your life. Number 2 is try to have a long-term perspective. And I know how it is, because many of us start to think this. You see your child not living up to his or her potential, and you begin to think, my toddler, my little one, can't even sit still in circle time, or my elementary school child, he keeps getting in trouble at recess and he can't sit still in class. And my older kids, they're just not motivated. They're not doing their homework. And we begin to project out into the future and think, who is going to hire this child? Who would possibly marry this child, right? And you start to get anxious about it. And you start to focus on the negatives all the time. And I know it's really hard, but just realize tonight will not determine your child's success in life. And if you can really step back, I know many of you have thought this before, if I can just get this child to adulthood, he's going to be great. And so try to keep that long-term perspective of, that call from the school today was disconcerting. It's quite honestly, it's a pain. It's frustrating. You're hurt. You don't know what to do. But realize that it's going to be okay. And just getting a call from school, that's not going to determine your child's progress. I'll just tell you, my son, I had my own parking lot at his schools. I had my own chair in the principal's office because we were constantly getting calls about his behavior when he was really young. Now he's 22 now, but he's one of the most phenomenal people I know in life. So your kids are going to be okay. Third thing, try to have a family tradition for when you walk through the door at night, because I know how it works. You're working all day. You're fighting traffic to get home. You may have picked up the kids from daycare or school, and you have extracurriculars. You've got to go to the grocery store, and you've got dinner and homework and bath time and bedtime. And your anxiety will cause you to kind of rush through the door and start barking orders of, we've got to do this and we've got to do that. And I'd encourage you to have a tradition. And I really love traditions for families affected by ADHD, because sometimes with ADHD, there's not a lot of internal order or organization. And rules are fine, but rules tell you what not to do. A tradition tells us what we're going to do. We're about to come up on Thanksgiving. We all have Thanksgiving traditions. So what's your tradition? When you walk through the door at night, what are you going to do differently? And I'd encourage you, I want this to be practical. You don't have a lot of time, but even 3 minutes of sitting on the floor, and there's something very calming about sitting down when you walk through your door. 3 minutes on the floor to connect with your kids, to lay out the plan, to calm things down before rushing headlong into the chaos can often help. A tradition you may have for your kids when they get home, especially for younger kids, is this. Hey guys, here's the deal. I hid your favorite Lego fire engine in the backyard. Bet you can't find it within the next 12 minutes. I just like interesting time limits. But the idea is, when your kids walk through the door after school, I don't always want to just get on them about put your backpack down, get your folder out, we've got to check everything, we've got to jump into homework. Sometimes giving them a specific job or challenge, like a treasure hunt, and especially if you're in an area where you can get them outside, even in the wintertime, that fresh air is great for them, and it just kind of takes the stress off of the day. If you can make the time or make it a priority, even a 10 or 15 minute walk after school, when you get home, maybe it's right after dinner, I'll tell you, we started doing that as a family. That 10 or 15 minutes outside just did something. It broke some of the stress. You're walking, you're talking, your kids, you've got kids who are storing up a lot of stuff from the day, and it allows them time to kind of get all that dumped out while they're walking. So whatever you want it to be, I'd encourage you to have a family tradition for the evening. And if you really want to go the extra step, what's your morning tradition that doesn't involve rushing around yelling at the kids and, trying to run out the doors? There's something for 2 or 3 minutes you can do in the morning that just slows things down. So that's number 3. Number 4, and this will be a hard one for a lot of you moms out there, ask for help. This is really hard because you're go-getters and you think you're being weak. you've been, moms, you've been lied to, because there are all those stories, and I know you know other moms that look like they have it all together and they're super mom and they can do everything, but you can't do it all alone. And so I encourage you with this is to ask other people for help. And I'll give you an odd idea, but odd ideas often work really well. Each of us has in our neighborhoods probably an older couple or a senior citizen who's retired. And there are a lot of older retired teachers and professionals in your neighborhood, and they're so underutilized, but they love helping people and they love kids as long as they don't, have to have them in their home for 8 hours a night, right? So this is a little bit of an odd thing, but don't be afraid to ask that older neighbor down the street if they could help out with your son or your daughter with homework once or twice a week. If your child can go down there and help them bake or cook or walk the dog, because being around older people and senior citizens is very grounding for kids. And here's the other part, and this will sound a little manipulative, and I'm going to use a little bit of guilt because it'll work on you, is this. If you don't ask other people for help, you actually rob other people of the joy that they get from helping you. Because even if they're not retired, they may be other parents in the neighborhood. They want to help you, and it brings them great joy to know, I spent 30 minutes with that family, with that kid, and I helped him with his homework. And your child, here's another beautiful thing. And how many of you know this to be true? You have kids who are awesome for other adults. When other adults ask your kids to do something, they help out. They say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. Now, when you ask them to do something, not usually. They're kind of difficult for you. But that's another advantage of asking other people for help. If you're a single mom even, ask someone in your church, your synagogue, for help and just say, listen, I'm really suffocating and I'm drowning here. And what would really help me is, would you mind making a meal for us one night a week? A casserole can be heated up and you can get 2 meals out of it. Again, you're not going to want to do that, but I guarantee you if you get in that habit of it's kind of humbling yourself and saying, I need help, you'll give someone else the joy of helping you, and it will lighten your load. And the other part is your kids will tend to listen to those other people, sometimes more than they listen to you. So you're going to have to write to me. If you actually do that, you will be one of the few women in the entire world who do that. So write to me. I'll be really proud of you if you do it. It's hard to do. Number 5. Here's the thing, and this will be very, very hard as well, all of this. Sometimes being a very busy parent is a blessing in disguise, because you literally don't have time to do things for your kids. So it's an opportunity for them to step up and be responsible for themselves. In our training, the phrase that we use is this: when we step back as parents, it gives our kids space to step up. When we step back from micromanaging and lecturing and doing everything for them, it actually gives them space to step up and learn how to do it themselves. And I'd like to make 2 points of this. One of the points is this. When we were kids, if you think about it, our parents were not that involved with us. They were there, but they didn't micromanage. They didn't do everything. They were kind of busy doing their thing. And we learned to do things on our own. And we learned how to fail, and our kids need to do that. And the second point I wanted to make is, you have kids that in our curriculum we would call stove touchers, right? So if you tell your kids, hey, the stove is hot, your kind of easygoing, compliant kids tend to say, oh, thanks for the information, Mom. But your strong-willed kids, your kids who are a little bit more, out there and aggressive at times, and just the leaders, we may call it being bossy, but they're leaders. They want to run to the kitchen and put their faces on the stove, right? They love to learn by doing and failing. So, I'd maybe hit at the guilt part of this is to say, it may be a really good thing that you can't do everything for and with your kids, because it will give them some independence that they actually crave. And you can begin to say, hey, and here's my tone in it. I will give you tools to help you do your homework, but your homework is not mine to do. I did mine when I was in school. It's your homework to do. I'll give you some tools, and we can talk about that in a few minutes, some different tools. I'll give you tools, but it's really up to you to do it. So I'd like you to figure out the best way for you to do your homework. If you want to do it laying upside down off the sofa, go for it. If you want to climb underneath your bed, go for it. I'd love for you to do that. But I'm turning it over to them. So again, really hard to do, moms, but I think you'll find it is very liberating when you don't do everything for your kids.
But, Kirk, I think you've hit on something really important with this comment. And I just from hearing our listeners in many, many webinars, I know that it's one of the single most difficult parenting tasks for parents of kids with ADHD. When do they step in and help, and when is that help warranted, and when do they step back? I think, we give them conflicting messages because sometimes they're told, well, our kids are really 3 years developmentally younger than their chronological age. You need to help. And other times, we say step back. Do you have any, I know there's no single answer, that every family is different, but do you have any advice for moms who are literally trying to figure out, should they go back to school and retrieve that lost homework paper? Should they set up the homework files, or should they let their child figure it out themselves? Where is the line there?
It's a really hard, right? It's a really hard line. I think maybe use this as a guidepost. Is this my goal is to give kids tools to succeed, but I want to begin where the child is, right? And so let's say you have a child who literally, is younger, where he just has zero organizational skills, and some of our kids don't. So just saying, hey, it's your schoolwork, your homework, you need to organize it. Well, if you turn it over to them and they don't have any skills or tools to do it, and they keep failing and failing and failing, well, then that's a sign to me, okay, I need to step in and let me start showing him how. Let me give him some tools. And while I'm just talking, I'll throw one out. A lot of our kids, what happens is they come home, they actually do their homework, but then they forget to turn it into their teacher, and they get knocked down on their grades, and all that happens. So, a practical thing that we've done, and I want to do this because I think it will demonstrate the catch-22 that parents are in here, is I would often ask the teacher, hey, when my son comes home from school, he does his homework. Would it be okay if I scanned the homework into my computer? Because the scanner costs like $10 now. Could we scan it into the computer, and then could we email you the homework? Because that way, Mrs. Teacher, you get what you want, which is, my son did his homework, and then he turned it in, but he emailed it to you ahead of time. Now, the question you'll get is, well, if you're doing that, are you then disabling him because he's not learning how to remember the next day?
Exactly. The dilemma right there, yeah.
So the dilemma for me, how I kind of solve that is I look at the bigger picture of, okay, I've got a 9-year-old. Well, a 9-year-old kid, or even a 12-year-old, turning in his homework, on the list of his priorities in his life, it comes in somewhere around 1,286. Right? He did his homework. It's out of my mind now. And so the truth is, he's not that motivated to turn his homework in. Now, see, I work a real job. You work a real job. So you have to remember to do stuff because you get a paycheck and your house has no lights and you have no food if you don't get the paycheck. But a little kid turning his homework, if I don't give him that tool, and so every day he forgets to turn in his homework, and now everything's a continual negative for that child because of that, well, then I weigh it against, that's a nice workaround. That's a creative, that's teaching, here's a creative solution. I have problems with organization, and I do myself. Right now, by my front door of my house, I have a little notepad, which is it remind me of something I have to do after the webinar, because I have a very busy brain like your kids do. So here's the catch-22 for me. Well, should I work really, really hard on my memory until I have a steel trap of a brain, Or do I take a practical thing and I take a little notepad and I stick it on the floor with my note on it? And so what I opt for is I'd rather spend my brain power doing other things and use this practical workaround. So I'm not sure if I answered that, but let me see if this makes sense. I want to begin giving kids tools to succeed because many of our kids have realistically 4 or 5 things that they really struggle with. Organization, remembering to turn in assignments, actually doing the homework itself, impulse control, they're blurting out in class. And just saying, you need to focus better on that and do that. Well, if that's not working and they keep getting in trouble, they'll begin to feel like failures, and you'll hear them say, well, I'm dumb, I'm stupid.
Right.
And that's and what I encourage moms and dads to hear is what they really want to say is, I don't want to mess up all the time. I really need some help in this area. So I would err at the beginning of this on giving kids lots of tools to succeed and showing them how. And as they get a success in an area, then I begin to step back.
Right.
I think that feels kind of balanced. Get a success, step back a little bit. Let's, so tonight don't go home and say, when the kids come home, you know what? I already did my homework. It's yours. Good luck. I think let's do this since that's up on a slide, doing homework in different ways. Here's a really cool thing to do. Observe your kids. Your kids, and I hope you're not offended by this, but they have quirks, right? They're a little bit different, and I like those quirks. But those quirks that they have and little odd things they do will often give you clues and ideas about how to help them. So let me throw out a couple. Some of you have kids who lay off the sofa upside down. A little bit odd, maybe, but they're doing it partially because when they're upside down, blood flow rushes to their brain. It actually helps them concentrate a little bit better. Some of your kids have sensory issues. Being upside down, it's kind of calming to them. I had kids who came to my house, and Susan, this is a weird one, but I guarantee you half the parents know this, have this kid. They take the cushions off of the sofa, lay down on that hard part of it, and then they want you to put the cushions on top of you and sit on top of them.
It's a sensory integration thing.
Yeah, the sensory, and sometimes the kids just like weird stuff because it's just different. And so here's how I use that. Well, I notice that my child likes confined places and being upside down and spinning. So my suggestion may be, hey, why don't we try doing homework tonight with you laying under the cushions on the sofa, and I'll sit on top of you and I'll read a book. A little bit odd, a little bit weird, sure. It may be, hey, instead of sitting at the kitchen table, why don't you sit underneath the kitchen table? Because some kids like confined spaces. And in fact, I have a lot of students who, if they were allowed to sit underneath their desks at school, would do much better with their classwork or tests. So, tonight with homework, let's give them some ideas. Sitting on the exercise ball. And you're going to have to experiment because every child's a little different. Some of your kids have asked you this, Mom, Dad, can I listen to music while I do homework? And we'll often say, no, because that will confuse you. But for some kids, the rhythm in bouncing on the exercise ball, the rhythm of actually swinging on a swing. I've had kids do homework like that. The rhythm of chewing a snack while they do their homework or listening to music or doing a combination of those things will actually create rhythm in the brain and help them learn better. So why don't we begin with this, Susan? I think this would be a good one of, let's begin giving our kids tools, and as they succeed, then in future days and weeks, we can say, you know what, I'm really proud of you because you came up with a very creative way to do your homework, and you know what? I bet you can find a different way to do it tonight. Not mine to do, but if you need some help, let me know. But that's kind of I'm available to help you, but I'm not hovering over you. And I think another guidepost may be, as kids get older, 4th, 5th, 6th grade, I want them to be accountable to their teachers a little bit more, right? To be able to say, hey, you don't have to do your homework, but you're going to, you need to talk to your teacher about this. because that's going to happen in, real life of, I can't go in and talk to your boss for you. So
Right.
I don't have a black and white answer. I'd say the guidepost is to know your child, get a success, build on that, and then keep building. And as you get successes, then that builds confidence.
One thing that a number of people have posted and we've heard before is that it's easier to provide tools to an elementary school student, but when you have a high school kid, so one person here says, I have a 10th grader who's failing most of his classes and he won't take any advice on how to do things better. And another person, her son's 15, in high school he's in a major downward spiral, totally resistant in terms of any advice, wants to handle on his own. And so, that tension, that oppositional behavior that comes along in the teen years, I think is a dilemma for parents.
Okay. Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll kind of transition. Well, let me talk about this. It'll take a couple minutes because it's...
No, I think that would be great. Yeah. Thank
okay.
you.
So for older kids, and this is kind of my assumption of what they've been through, knowing our kids, as we may call them, they've probably struggled a little bit through school. It hasn't been easy for them. The truth is, many of our kids, they're not really motivated by school. Sometimes for some of our kids, book learning is honestly kind of boring to them. They're more experiential, right? And so by the time they get to high school, here's what they may be experiencing. They've got friends and they see the other kids who are kind of sailing through school and they're taking their ACTs and SATs and they've got visions of college and they're going to be engineers and doctors and professionals and have this great future and they're really motivated by it. But then you have one of our kids who literally has just struggled. I mean, honestly, for some of our kids, just getting through the school day of sitting still for 7 or 8 hours, listening to someone talk about something that quite honestly they're not always interested in, and it's not even meaningful for their life. I mean, that's just the truth. They're kind of begin to shut down, and they've struggled, say a 10th grader, he struggled for 10 years. And so to have mom or dad come along, it just becomes blah, blah, blah. I don't care anymore. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. It doesn't mean anything. For some of your kids, what's inside is, I'm never going to be successful like those other kids, or like my perfect brother or sister who gets all A's all the time, and I've always been the bad kid, and I struggle. Even though I'm really smart, I struggle to get B's and C's because of focus issues. So they begin to shut down. So I totally get where they're coming from. So moms and dads, I'd encourage you, this is kind of a 3-step process, and it's going to take a little while longer. I don't have a magic answer. But I'd encourage you to do 3 things. One is this. Make a list of that particular child's gifts, talents, and passions. Because here's why. Your kids who really do well in school and like school, well, they're good at school. And so every day, teachers and parents are saying, oh, you're so smart, you're on the honor roll, you got an A on your exam. And so they're doing what they're good at doing, and it builds their confidence. Whereas some of you have kids who every day is a struggle. But see, your kids have gifts and talents that don't often get recognized or rewarded in school, right? Outside of school, some of your kids are amazing with creative endeavors. They can build something from scratch. Your kids can build their own video game. They can do amazing things outside of school, but we tend not to focus on that. It's always school, school, school. So second thing is this, after you make that list, and I'll try to give you a couple quick examples, give those teenagers an opportunity to use those gifts outside of the home, at school, church, synagogue, in the community, with a neighbor. And here's the big thing I want you to key on. Third thing is accountable to another adult. I'd really look for a mentor. By the time you have a teenager, and look, mine's 22. He was just in his teenage years. He tuned me out. I wasn't like some great parenting expert filled with wisdom to him. I was just his stupid dad, blah, blah, blah. But, he would listen to other adults. Because the truth is, by the time our kids get to their teen years, we have lectured them and been on them. And the truth is, we've probably focused a lot on the negative for 10, 12, 15 years. And so they're done. and they're not going to listen to us. But, there's something magical that happens when you find a mentor. And this could be a college kid, an older high school kid. It could be an adult. And I'd encourage you, remember we talked about finding an older person in your neighborhood or an entrepreneur, because sometimes entrepreneurs, they're very much like our kids. Most of them, in my experience, have some strain of ADHD in them. And I'll give you an example, Susan, of something I've done with a lot of kids. And moms, dads, you can take this example and apply it. But I'd have a teenage kid who's like, I'm shut down, I'm not doing my homework, school's stupid, you're stupid. And I'd say, what do you love doing? I said, I love drawing, I want to be an architect one day. But there's no real class in school for being an architect. And so they don't really see how anything applies to it. But I've often gone in the community and said to an architect or asked around and said, listen, architect, would you mind mentoring this kid? And here's the conversation that an architect can have with a teenager that a mom and dad can't. He can go to that kid and say, listen, you've got a gift because I've seen your drawings. I've seen your artwork. You can see in 3 dimensions. I've seen how you build with Legos and do things. You can see you could be an architect, and I'm willing to mentor you 1 day a week after school. You can come to my office. And again, I told you this is not easy. It's going to take some time, but it's very, very effective. If you come to my office 1 day a week, you're going to run copies and run errands for me. But along the way, I will teach you and show you how to read blueprints and be an architect. But my condition for mentoring you is if I hear from your parents that you're not keeping a B average, if you're mouthing off, if you're not doing your chores, you're not coming to my office. And in my experience, most of our kids will say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. And here's the key. You have to find what your teenager cares about. See, as parents, we care about good grades and good behavior and good study skills, and being polite and all of those things. And quite honestly, your teenager who's struggling, I don't care about my grades. I don't really care about school. But I do care about being an architect. And here is the key for some of your kids are very good with younger kids. They have a gift. And so find a daycare program, a VBS program at your church, some place where your kids can mentor, teach little kids how to play soccer. Some of your kids are amazing with animals. Take them to an animal shelter, to a vet's office, because here's the key. If you get them doing something, and using their gifts and doing something they feel passionate about around another adult. See, that lady at the animal shelter will say, you know what, Jacob, you've got a gift with animals. When you walk in here, those dogs just settle down around you. Have you ever thought about being a veterinarian? And that will have never occurred to your child because he doesn't have the grades to be a veterinarian. But here's the beautiful part of this process is once your kids get that vision, and it often comes from another adult who sees something that you can't, because all you see is an insolent, unmotivated, lazy teenager who plays video games and mouths off. See, if I met your teenager, I would see amazing things in them because I don't have to live with them, right? That's true though. And I'd be able to say, man, you've got a gift in this area. Have you ever thought about being X? And it begins to create this vision of, no, I've never thought about that before. But they'll come home and they'll be like, Mom, Dad, the lady at the animal shelter at the vet's office said that I could be a vet, or he said I could be an architect. And once these kids get the vision for their life, then school matters to them. Now, here's an interesting, hard point. I can't guarantee they'll like it. They may say every day, I hate school, it's stupid, homework's stupid. But they'll do it because now I want to be that veterinarian. I want to be an architect. And the architect mentor said, I have to go to college to be a mentor, so I'll hate it, but I'll do it. And I don't need my child to enjoy school. I just want him to do his homework and get the grades and get through. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the whole idea of having another adult in your life is a brilliant one. And in fact, Deirdre, who's listening, posted this. She said, my suggestion, get a tutor. I resisted for years and years because of the cost, but I would, at this point, I'd go without eating to pay for this tutor.
Right.
My son has someone with a much younger and different perspective, and I don't have to fight with him over math. So it's another version. It's not as great as your, veterinarian tutor, but another adult in the mix. I think that, makes huge sense.
I think it helps. And I think even for younger kids, that tutor idea, there are girls and boys, high school kids, even college kids in your area who are in education. And so saying like, hey, I'll give you a little bit extra gas money here. You don't have to pay them that much. But, it's different when your child's sitting with a 24-year-old who's kind of cool or
right,
cute,
exactly. Yeah.
rather than frazzled mom and dad being upset. So I love that idea.
No, it's a great idea. Just another high school homework kind of question rather. A couple of people have said things like, posted things like, my son likes to do homework lying in bed, or someone else. My son says that watching Netflix, listening to the radio, and doing homework all at the same time are calming. How should parents, deal with that? Especially if the child in question isn't doing all that well in school, but insists that this kind of, is that a step back and let it happen, or is that an interfere situation? How would you?
I'm going to judge it by, okay, is he actually getting his homework done?
Yeah.
And you
right.
kind of have to decide too. I mean, a lot of parents are very, it's like you came home as a kid and you just knocked your homework out. Well, some of your kids are grazers, and it's going to take them hours and hours. If they get it done, they got it done. Now, most of your kids are not going to do homework in the same way or in the same time frame that you want them to. So if they're doing it lying on their bed, I mean, quite honestly, I remember as a teenager, I used to sit on my bed in the afternoon and I would drum. I had my pen out and I drum on my bed. I remember having TV on. Do I recommend that? No, because for many of your kids, they're just going to get sucked into Netflix and the TV show. So
right.
A middle ground could be, hey, lay on your bed, no Netflix, no TV. By the way, I'm not a big fan of TV in the bedroom anyway. There's too many issues.
Yeah.
But listen, if you want to listen to some music while you do your homework, close your door. Listen to that music as loud as you want it. I don't care. Listen, if Metallica helps you get your homework done, go for it, my friend. If that's what gets it done, the beat, ideally not. I know we all want our kids to listen to classical music. The funny thing is, my son didn't in teenage years. He listened to pretty hard stuff because the rhythm in it really kind of helped him. Mm-hmm. He's 22 now. He listens to classical music all the time. So they'll come to it.
Wow. That's impressive.
Well, it's like most of our kids, when you're not on them about it, then they do it. But the more you try to like jam something down their throats, they resist it. And then as soon as you step back, then they do it. So I'd say give him tools, some alternatives. If he's just not doing his homework, then you're like, dude, this isn't working.
Enough with the Netflix, right? Yeah.
Yes, you know every line to that movie, but you haven't done any of your homework. I don't think it's working. So here are, for teenagers, sometimes, and this will be an odd one, but again, sometimes odd things work. I used to take my son to a local ice rink or a coffee shop, and we'd do homework outside of the house. One, there's no TV, no video games there. And two, I know this will be counterintuitive because we think kids with focus issues sometimes need to be in a very quiet place. But for many of our kids, being in a highly stimulating place is actually very helpful. My son works for me now. He actually, at this very moment, he texted me right before this, and he said, Dad, I'm in a coffee shop doing my work. Because he likes the smell of the coffee shop. He likes watching people, i.e. girls, come in and out, right? And he's interacting with people. So, experiment with that. There's no, with a teenager, I may not sit over him at the kitchen table, but if you want to lay upside down and listen to music with your headphones on while you drum against the sofa. Have at it. Just do it.
Well, what you're saying is it's all about, if you're getting it done, we don't really care how, so
Right.
do whatever you have to do, right? Yeah.
Right.
Why don't you go through the rest of your slides? Because there's lots of other questions in various directions, and I don't want to lose your really good thoughts. So before I tee those up, why don't you, how about continuing? Okay.
So if you go ahead, let's go, we just did homework. So the next one, and Susan, I can come back to this because I'll make this specific, but, with a few discipline principles, firm, even, matter-of-fact tone, try to take the emotion out of it, because as soon as we get emotional and as soon as we get very personal, you know what, I can't believe that after all I've done for you, you would do, the guilt trips, the emotion tends to add emotion to the situation. So my discipline, my tone correcting children is always even, matter of fact. It's almost like, listen, I'm a dispenser of wisdom. You have a choice to make in how you do this, and I'm just going to let you know kind of what the consequence is. And I'm good either way. You have a choice to make, and if here's a quick one. I'm giving you guys 27 minutes to play your video games this afternoon or evening. And it doesn't matter. I don't care what your time limit is. I just like interesting time limits. You get 27 minutes. It's your job. And here's where stepping back. It is your job to manage your own screen time. So you set the clock on your iPhone or the timer, because I want to get parents out of the habit of, okay, guys, 1 minute left, 30 seconds, turn off your video games. And then we get the whole, hold on, I need to save it. I need to get to the next level and all that drama. So it sounds like you have 27 minutes to play. And I'm going to promise you this, if you choose to continue to play your video games for even half a second past 27 minutes, then you have chosen to lose your video games for the next 3 days. Choice is up to you, and I remove myself from the room. The truth is that your kids are going to push the limits. And when I come back in, there's no long lecture about how responsible I was as a kid. The tone is, hey guys, just want to remind you, you just chose to lose your video games for the next 3 days. Now, they're going to throw a tantrum. They're going to call you the worst mother in the world, and they hate you and all that. And my response is, hey, listen, I'm just keeping my promise to you. I promise you 3 days with no video games. I keep my promise. I'm a person of integrity. You can count on me. And more important than anything is kind of the tone of, you guys have a choice to make. And I believe you can do it. So here's a timer. See, I'm giving them tools. I'm not setting them up for failure.
Yeah, that's really smart. Because as someone posted, well, our kids have problems with understanding the passage of time, so aren't we setting them up to fail? But what you're saying is clear boundaries and a tool so they know how much time has passed, right? Yeah.
So you have 27 minutes. So here's what we'll do the first couple times. I'll actually help you set that timer on your iPhone. And instead of setting it for 27 minutes, I know that it takes you a few minutes to wind down. So why don't we set the timer for 23 minutes, because then that gives you 4 minutes to kind of wind down, right? So I'm not going to do that with a 4-year-old, right? So I'm going to give them a little bit more tools, but the tone begins, it's simple and direct. I'm using very few words. I'm not going on and on. I'm not making it personal.
Right.
If you don't mind, I'll do one more kind of an opposite, kind of heavy on the tools. Say you've got a child in class, and he really has trouble sitting still in class for an hour, which I do. So I can set him up for success, and the teacher can say, if you can't sit, I'm going to take away recess and blah, 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 that whole negative thing. Here's a tool that we give teachers. So let's say the child's name is Jacob. And I say, Jacob, man, I can really use your help. Because all the parents know your kids love helping other adults. Again, not you, but other adults. And it makes them feel important. It makes them feel like an adult. And so, Jacob, here's the deal. When I teach in class, my mouth gets really dry, so I could really use your help. You and I are going to have a secret signal. And you can't see this, but like when I touch my nose or tug on my ear and look at you, here's what I want you to do. You get up out of your seat. You come up to my desk. You grab my water bottle. You take it to the back of the room. You refill it. You bring it back up, sit it on my desk, and you sit down. You don't get to talk to anybody. You're not going to distract anybody. You're going to be Mr. Invisible. And again, I do that for little kids. Love being Mr. Invisible.
Great suggestion. Okay? Yeah.
Not older kids. They'll get beat up for being Mr. Invisible, but you just do it without that. And so here's how it works. As a teacher and a parent, I know that this child right now can only sit for about 17 minutes until he needs to move. So at 17 minutes, I give him a signal, and look, he comes up, and the idea here is this is a very practical, specific, concrete tool. I didn't look at him and say, you need to stop fidgeting, because the truth is many of your kids just can't. But I gave him it takes 22 seconds to refill that water bottle. It's a specific job. He held the water bottle in his hand. It's very tactile. And now as a teacher, I get to say, oh, Jacob, thank you, thank you. He sits down. I just gave him some appropriate movement, and it only took 22 seconds because I didn't say, hey, little guy with ADHD, I know it's really hard to sit, so if you get bored, run around my class. I didn't say that. I gave him a specific job. And now he feels successful. And I'll add one more quick thing to it. As he does that, see, I'm using a lot of positive reinforcement, because after class, I can go up as a teacher and I can give that kid knuckles and say, man, that was awesome today. You know what I'm going to do? You know what I want to do tomorrow? I'd like to see if you can sit for 21 minutes in my class, because you know what? I believe that you can do it. And over time, I begin having the child wait for 21 minutes and let him squirm a little bit and fight that. And ideally, I may get him up to, I don't know, 26, 27 minutes. That's just his limit. He's going to need to move. But I just taught him some impulse control in small steps, because we started at 17 minutes, and within a couple months, I met his limit of about 26, 27 minutes. But now I'm creating a success for that child. I'm teaching him discipline, but I'm giving him a tool to do it, rather than saying, if you don't learn how to sit, I'm taking away recess.
You're in trouble. Yeah, interestingly, one of the, Fanita said, my 6-year-old's gotten to the point where discipline is not effective. I can take away all of his favorite things and it doesn't matter. And I think what you're saying is, to use positive reinforcement as opposed to that taking negative things away just isn't going to work, right?
It won't work. Most of our kids don't respond to consequences or, those behavior charts at school.
Yeah.
For most kids, their experience is within 5 minutes of sitting in class, I'm already on red. And so they begin to give up and say, I'm never going to get to green. So for that great mom who asked that question, here's what I encourage you to do, all of us, for the next week. Every time your child struggles with some kind of behavior, let the conversation with your spouse and teachers go from, well, what are we going to take away, to, hey, what are 2 or 3 different tools we can give this child to help him with that behavior? A lot of people who know us know we use a little sensory strip, this little double-sided tape, and it's got some, on one side it has like different textury strips on it. Velcro, could be denim, a button, because there's research that says when kids play with textured objects or tactile objects, it actually improves concentration. So for elementary school age kids, we actually take this little sensory strip and we tape it underneath the child's desk. Well, the child can sit in class all day long playing with these different textury strips. It doesn't make any noise. They can't throw it. It's taped down. Nobody can see it. It doesn't change the whole school day. But if I'll give you this quick one I had to do with my son. I go in and talk to the teacher and say, I know you're going to struggle with my son, and I know it's a challenge because he does have some issues with focus and attention and impulse control, and I know the struggle that you have because you have 25 students. Here are 3 tools that I know will help my son. 1, I'm going to make the sensory strip. Can I place it underneath his desk? No one will know. Nobody will see it. In fact, I'll make 25 of them for all the kids in your class. Number 2, when my son starts to fidget and struggle in class, could you give him this water bottle to fill up, because he loves helping other people, to give him a specific job. And Mrs. Teacher, the other thing is this. For the next week, every time my child does make a good choice, every time he doesn't blurt out in class, every time he does raise his hand, could you put a little check mark on his sheet? Because for at least 1 week, rather than coming home with that little red and all those like frowny faces on his sheet, I'd love him to come home with 7 or 8 check marks, because then I can say, why did you get that check mark? And he can say, Mom, I really wanted to blurt out about this new Star Wars video game, but instead I raised my hand and I asked the teacher, and she said that was good impulse control. And you start doing some things like that with these kids. Are they always going to be the most well-behaved kids? No, they're going to struggle a little bit. But I can start to build confidence and give them some tools so they feel competent and so they don't shut down all the time. So I go heavy. If you're taking notes, use the word tools. Tools to be successful.
Yeah. I want to ask just a working mom question here, because there are a couple of posted things. This is such a great question. They say that they're both saying in different ways that the moment when they come home from work is very difficult because their child, in one case, it's a 12-year-old, and in another case, it's a slightly older child, has been home on their own since 2:30 or so. They're kind of in their own rhythm, and they just feel that the presence of a parent is intrusive. And it's such a classic working mom problem. You arrive, and how do you sort of get things on track? It's kind of a lot harder than being there. And I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I think we oftentimes, really forget that the moms aren't there necessarily during those important after school hours.
So for older kids, may even ask them. One of the questions, I think what I heard was the child is kind of see it like is intrusive. Well, if I've got an older child who's kind of in his own little rhythm, I may just have an honest conversation and say, listen, here's my goal at night. You've got to get your homework done. That's all you really have to do. You've got to get your homework done. We'll take care, Mom and Dad, we'll take care of the food. We'll get dinner, we'll do that stuff. You've got a couple of chores to do, but I just want you to get your homework done. And the other thing I want at night is I want us to be able to relax and talk to each other and just enjoy each other and learn about the day and talk about interesting things. So, you're 12, you're 10, whatever age. I know sometimes when I come home, it kind of ruins your rhythm and you feel like, oh, the parent's here. And I know what that's like because I love when my boss is away on a trip because I feel relaxed. And so you may that's a step back and say, when I come home, what do you want our routine to be? And they may say, Mom, when you come home, why don't you, could you go upstairs? Why don't you take a few minutes to yourself, which, all of us would love, I'm sure, and I'll get my homework done. And it may be that there's a silent thing. I remember coming home at times and just giving my son like a little fist bump, but I didn't talk to him because I don't want to feel like, I don't want, hear my dad talking all about your day. And sometimes our kids don't want to talk about their day. And I respect that. So sort of
read the situation a little bit and kind of feel.
Yeah, and it may be, remember we talked about having a tradition. Just say, okay, Mom, when you come home from work, what is going to calm you down most? What is going to help you? And, realizing not feeling guilty because working mom, you're going to want to come home and find out about your child's day and connect with them.
And see if they're doing their homework, right?
And it may be that the best thing you can do is focus on yourself because you've been at work all day, you battled traffic, now you've got this busy schedule. So maybe you say to your kids, hey, when I get home, I'm going to take like 12 minutes. And I'm going to go upstairs and I'm going to put on a little bit of music. And I don't, some of you, maybe you have prayer time, you may read a devotional, some of you may do yoga, whatever it is. And you take 12 minutes to kind of decompress from the day, maybe change your clothes. So when you do walk down into that kitchen or living room and you engage with your child, you're a lot more relaxed. So your tone isn't, because sometimes when we come home, the tone is, hey, are you getting your homework done? How much homework? What have you got done?
What's going on here? Yeah.
And so you may sit down next to them because the sitting down is a very calming thing. So think about a tradition and work that out with your kids.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay, great. So
don't feel guilty. Don't feel guilty.
Yeah, exactly. Why don't you I don't want to miss your insights. I don't think anyone else does either. People say, are we going to get through the slides? How many more strategies do we have here? I know you had 10.
Probably not a lot. I'll go through them quickly, and then we can get to any more questions. So if you want to go ahead and advance that. So discipline, we could spend like a whole hour, but we kind of went through that.
I know.
Next one is, show your kids how to calm down and control their emotions, because sometimes we just tell them, hey, you need to calm down. And we went through a few tools for teaching impulse control, but even with kids' emotions, how do you calm down? Like and I'll just throw out a couple things again. We could spend a whole hour on controlling emotions, but think about the phrase we often use. We have a thing called ADHD University, and this is part of it, is teaching kids this phrase: motion changes emotion. And I wish I had that on a slide, but motion or movement changes emotion. Because sometimes when our kids get upset, we just say, hey, you need to calm down, don't get so upset. Well, that doesn't work for me as an adult. So the idea of using some kind of movement is a tool, there's that word again, to help a child calm down. Because here's what's happening. I'm anxious, I'm overwhelmed, I'm frustrated, and so I'm going to hit or kick or yell or bite or scream or throw things, and I'm upset. And so I need a tool. How do I calm down? So I'll throw 3 quick ones out. I wish we had time to do 100 of them, but one may be, hey, Jacob, I can tell you're really frustrated. And that's a great phrase to use with these kids. What they're saying to you is going to sound like disrespect and defiance, right? I hate you, homework, stupid, you're stupid. And just saying, young man, you're not going to use that language with me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just going to escalate. But looking at your child and saying, you know what? When I hear that tone in your voice, it usually tells me you're really frustrated or overwhelmed. Because that's very, for all the moms out there, this is what you want your husband to say. Honey, I can tell you're really frustrated, right? Or, you should be frustrated, not like, you know what, you're just overreacting. No mom wants to hear that. You want to hear, honey, you know what, it sounds like you're really frustrated right now. How can I help you? So that's the tone I'm going to take with the child. And so I may say, Jacob, listen, it sounds like you're really frustrated. I get that. I'm kind of frustrated after a long day at work. Listen, do me a favor. Yeah, could you dump your Legos out? In about 22 seconds, I'll come in and I'll build a little spaceship with you. And the idea behind it is I'm giving the child something tactile to do with his hands. Because in the moment, I can't calm down. I don't know how to calm down. But I do know how to build with my Legos. And in the process of building with the Legos, well, that's calming. Coloring. Coloring with a 4-year-old or a teenage girl is really effective when people are upset, because just saying, young lady, we need to have a talk about your attitude, tends to escalate. But if as the adult, I sit down and I begin coloring, one, it calms me down, and I begin to draw my child into this totally different emotional space, which says, I'm in control of myself. I know we're running out of time, so we may have to get this. So I'll throw this out very quickly, the next 2 slides. Don't feel guilty because you can't get everything done, because you're just not going to. Do the right things. And last thing, make yourself a priority. And I try to always close with this is, enjoy your child. They're difficult to enjoy at times, and it's difficult to enjoy life. But if everything's always negative, tonight, let your goal be, I'm going to connect with my child and just enjoy like one of those amazing traits he has. Even if there are 5 other traits that are driving me crazy. Because once you enjoy them, it makes it easier to get to the other stuff.
Kirk, thank you so much. Your positivity and your focus on what's good about our kids and how we can focus on that is just really so refreshing, and I think something that we all need to hear. So thanks so much for your time. There are just tons of great questions here, and hopefully we can get you back one of these days to continue these helpful messages. Thanks everyone for taking part. And
thank you very much.
Kirk, so much. Thanks everybody.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.